since we've kind of been talking about it, let's, I guess, officially get into our first topic then. And that's about mitigating the risks when it comes to game development. This is a kind of a continuation of our discussion last week, where it's been so many discussions that I had this week. What was our main topic last week? Oh yeah, it was about making games memorable, and about everything you can do to make your game stand out. And when we were discussing that, we were talking about how there are things developers can do to mitigate how risky it is to make a video game. And again, for people who are new, it is very risky. And no matter what your game project is, to take a game from concept to release.
Exactly. Like the way it is in today's market, this didn't used to be true, but now this is the reality of things. The reality of things now is if you just make a great game and you put it out there, you have probably a better chance of buying one ticket to the lottery and winning $5 billion than you do for your game to succeed and make, I don't know, $30,000.
Mm-hmm. And like as you said, Char, like we have played this year alone so many interesting and innovative indie games, and a lot of them did not do well or aren't doing well in the market. Again, like if you remember, Char, we played Vision Soft Reset at the beginning of this year,
Mm-hmm.
and let's see how many Steam reviews it's up to. 8.
It
And
doesn't
it's
even have a review score. You got to get to 10 to get a review score.
yeah, and that has been at 8 for the last 4 or 5 months too. Like it has not gotten any bigger there.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and as you were just saying, it doesn't matter how great that game is. That's a commercial failure. Like there's no denying it.
Yeah. I think it was a great game, but
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely a commercial failure. And we had a post earlier today um, about Treasure Adventure World, and it's failing. I don't know how good of a game it is. I've never played it, but you can look at their numbers, and it was not good. It's far better than our game, but they
Mm-hmm.
had pre-orders through Humble Bundle. Humble wouldn't even let us on their platform,
Mm-hmm. Let's
but
take a look here.
their pre-orders through Humble Bundle was 1,000 copies. Then they sold 1,300 copies on Steam, 725 copies on GOG, and 75 more on Humble Bundle, which was just over 2,000 copies,
Mm-hmm.
which is not anything basically.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Is this the game that I was thinking of? Treasure Adventure. Okay, so the original was Treasure Adventure Game, right? Yes, and that's one that I play, and that's one that's free to play, and it's available on GOG. And so Treasure Adventure World, that's kind of like their big budget, or quote unquote, big budget. I guess it's considered a sequel or a reboot.
I have no idea.
Hmm. Let's see what's going on.
It's selling for $9.99. So if
Mm-hmm.
we do some basic math, I'll get
Mm-hmm.
back to you on that.
Okay, so it is a remake. And this is exactly something that I talked about on one of my pieces I wrote. I think I said this on either the reality of game development or making a sustainable game. That some developers, like after they've had one good game, they'll either double down and try to make something even bigger, or they'll try and do like the first game, but make it as a remake or a remaster or grow that design. Ooh,
I know nothing about that from
mm-hmm.
Asia or anything.
Yeah.
Uh,
So it came out like I think like 1 month apart from Vision Soft Reset too.
yeah,
Mm.
but looking at their numbers, basically, after you take out taxes and Steam fees and whatnot, you're looking at maybe a total income of about a little bit less than $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And $10,000 isn't. I mean, what can you pay for $10,000? That's what, maybe 6 months at minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't even think it's that much.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
it
can
depends on where
guarantee
you're
you
at.
that that game took more than 6 months
Yeah.
and one person.
And the first one, I think, according to the page on GOG, it took them 2 years to make the free one.
Yeah, and then they just built on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So they got paid roughly, probably, if it's a single developer,
mm-hmm.
they probably got paid less than 50 cents an hour.
And
If
another, I
it's
think, big point about this again is that their amount of money that they made to some people, like $10,000, that could be like $10 million. Like, oh my god, I can't believe I made $10,000. And like every game's development is different like that, and it also makes it very hard, I think, to talk about this. Because we had this whole discussion when we were talking about Kickstarters, and why is this Kickstarter worth $30,000 to get this game, and then this one is $70,000? Like, it's very hard for a lot of people to understand just what goes into making a video game, and the very fact that just because you don't see it doesn't mean that game costs a lot of money.
Yeah, and it's not even just that. It's amateur developers don't know what it costs to make video games.
Yep.
They're like, oh, we can make this game for $20,000. 2 months later, oh, we're going to need a lot more money.
Or they'll try and shortchange it, hoping that they'll be able to push through it. I still remember, what was it? Too Dark, the game from Forever Now, and they got, I think, what was it, like 25 or no, I think it was a little over $30,000 for 2 years of development and a 20-man studio. Like, something, those numbers aren't adding up.
Yeah, man, those people all working for free.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck having them stay on, because like I've worked with many people that work for free, and you know how many of them stuck with me for longer than 2 weeks? Less than one out of 1,000, less than 1,000 of them. And then when you get to those that last more than 2 weeks, it's like, how many of those are going to last a month?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and not very much in the way of getting free employment. I mean, it does happen. Like, it definitely does happen. I mean, my teammate Monkey is a good aspect of that. He's been with me for, I think, like 4 or 5 years now. Of course, we're both not getting paid anything. It's not that I'm getting paid anything and he's getting paid anything. We're both co-founders,
Mm-hmm.
and we're both not getting paid.
Yeah. And when it comes to game development, as we said a few minutes ago, that a lot of people forget about the marketing side, but we also talked about the UI earlier. Now, in terms of, I guess, like our main topic when it comes to risk mitigation, I guess for you, Shark, and I'm sure any developers watching, you can leave a comment as well. What do you feel are the biggest risks when it comes to designing a video game?
Well, the number one I've encountered that you can mitigate, and this is also a very hard one to mitigate, is the art.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as I've said this many times, the art is going to be in your screenshots. The art is going to be in your trailer. The art is, and then there's the art of editing that's going to be make up your trailer. And it's going to be your trailer, your screenshots that gets somebody to push the buy button.
Mm-hmm.
Unless they've seen like a Let's Play on YouTube or something like that. It's going to be strictly off of that. And, which doesn't give your place, your mechanics to give a you can't get your mechanics over a screenshot or a trailer or anything. You might be able to get one mechanic in your trailer, one really important mechanic, maybe. But beyond that, like the gameplay won't ever come through on the trailers or the screenshots. Only the art will.
Mm-hmm.
And if your art isn't good enough to make them push the buy button, then nobody's going to be able to play the most amazing game in the world that you made that just doesn't have the best art.
Yep.
So art is sadly the number one. You've got, if you don't have the art to draw people in, it stand out from rest of the market. And the thing is as people are listening to this and as developers are incorporating better art into there, now it goes to a whole new level of you've got to have better art than they had. And it's like an endless cycle of you've got to keep on topping everybody else if you want to be discovered. Now, after you have a fan base and everything that is large enough to support you, that's not so important. But, I mean, it still would be important, but to get other people to discover you. But once you have a fan base, then you're pretty much good, as long as you don't screw up.
Yeah. But the problem, of course, is how do you get those fans in the first place? And this is one of the things that we've talked about before with, how much success kind of breeds more success. We've seen this with major studios. Oh, hold on. Well, I was saying, we've seen this with major studios like Kid Fox. Oh, wow, my voice is really dying. Oh man, allergy season is not a good season for me. But
Nope.
studios like Clay Entertainment, Kid Fox Games, or even smaller developers like Emma McMillan and Zach Barth have built up their respective fan bases. And once you're at that point, it does make things a lot easier. But the issue, though, is, as we all know, how do you get them in the first place to even give your game the time of day?
Yeah, the thing is 5 years ago, make a great game, you'll get a fan base. Simple as that. Now, that's not the case.
Yep.
Now you've got to make a game. I wouldn't say you've got to make a good game. I mean, you've got to make a game that is good enough and gets enough exposure and sells enough copies. And
that's a lot of enoughs that have to happen there. And this is only the very weird thing. So as you've been saying this the last few minutes, Shark, about in the past you just needed a good game. And we've seen developers who have been around for a long time kind of get by. Like Jeff Vogue being one of the quintessential examples of this. He's made, of course, a living out of Spireweb software and kind of classic CRPG design. And the one thing that I've always wondered is how well does his games do for a contemporary audience? If we were to put somebody who's never played those games down and let them play a game from Spireweb software, are they going to love it or hate it? And I just don't know the answer to it. But he has certainly, and on the podcast I did with him, he has made enough to live off of his games. And that is kind of like one of the high goals for independent development.
Mm-hmm. Getting enough to live off of and continue making games. I mean, that's the real indie goal right there.
Yep.
I mean, to go beyond that would be amazing and great. And I wouldn't say that every indie developer doesn't want that, but the goalpost where let's give a sports analogy. You're playing football or whatever. this, let's do baseball actually, where where once you get to where you can support yourself and keep on making games and everything, that is a home run, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is past the line. It is a home run. Now then, there's no developer ever that did not want to just smash it into the solar system, into the sun,
Yeah.
But
Everyone, like we've said this, everybody wants to be the next Minecraft or the next Stardew Valley or Five Nights at Freddy's. But, like, the developers who only think about their game on that front, I think they tend to burn out, like, the quickest in the independent space. Because you can't really have every one of your games be Minecraft or have that level of success. I mean, hell, Mojang didn't even have that with their second game. As we all remember, Scrolls. That other game that I'm sure everybody here has played, as much as Minecraft these days. But,
yeah, I don't think any game has ever had that. I don't think.
yeah.
I think every one has only had one, unless you count sequels
Yeah.
to that one. But I wouldn't really count that.
But
That's just iterations.
But as we said, for a lot of developers out there, just getting that one game is kind of like the major goal. Again, like something like Five Nights at Freddy's. If you remember the story, Scott Cawthon has been making games since the '90s. How many people know about those games? Probably very, very few people. How many people know what Five Nights at Freddy's is? I think everybody. Again, like the wildest thing was I saw people doing sketches of Five Nights at Freddy's hanging up in my allergy doctor's office. Like that was one of those very weird moments there.
Yeah, it's you. In my opinion, as a developer, you can't be going for that one game that is going to be wildly popular. Because there's no predicting it.
And I think that's a point we need to kind of hammer on, or we have to drill down for people watching. That while your goal is certainly to make a game that's successful, you can't be thinking about, I think, sustaining yourself in the market as only being the, do or die, YOLO, I'm going to spend, every one of my games is going to be a 5 to 10 year, epic struggle, and it will be this amazing game at the end of it. I'm going to, oh, here's another example about risk mitigation. Don't take out a second or third mortgage on your house to try and fund your game. That's very risky.
Or first one.
Yeah. And again, like, it's one of those issues that we've talked about before with the romanticizing of game development. Because the examples we've named so far, Minecraft, Five Nights at Freddy's, I'll throw another one, Cuphead. These are all games that were developed as very much like a, all-in kind of thing. Like, this was the only thing from that developer or from that company. So if it didn't succeed, the question is what happens to them? Now, I think with someone like Scott Cawthon, I think he's been developing games long enough to... I don't think he probably bet everything he had on Five Nights at Freddy's. But the same couldn't be said of the Cuphead developers. And as we've said, people will look at Cuphead and they will only see the amazing success of that game. They'll see Microsoft, coming in, and I think they either bought the studio or they kind of became the publisher of that game. And it took off, it's successful, developers are happy and great. But on the other side of the coin there, if it didn't do well, where would those developers be right now?
Yeah. I mean, let's just say, for example, Project Triad or one of our future games becomes wildly successful. Who's going to, out of all those people that know about the wild success of that, think about Chromasia and its utter failure, in its first launch. I mean,
they'll just say, and if it does become a success, you're going to probably see 10 very similar, competitive CCGs all of a sudden all being developed at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is the same thing like I said with The Darkest Dungeon. How many dungeon crawling, very challenging RPG roguelites came out after Darkest Dungeon succeeded? How many roguelites came out after FTL succeeded? Can we count that at this point?
Yeah. A lot of that is people money chasing. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they made money. Let's go get a piece of that pie because this is easy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, nope.
No.
And,
Five Nights at
they,
Freddy's as well. How many fan games, spiritual successors, remakes, demakes, you name it, makes, have come out trying to capture that same magic?
yeah. It just, there's very few times when that works.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time that I know of off the top of my head that worked was with Fortnite taking over PUBG. But again, PUBG had it was barely a game. It was more of a mod than a game.
Yeah. And again, how many people understood that point? Probably not too many. Again, how many battle royale games have came out trying to chase Fortnite? And like this goes back to again like our major topic here that when Epic looked at PUBG, they saw room to improve it. It's the very same thing Blizzard has done for decades. Although, again, we may be talking differently in the coming months or years. But
Yeah,
Blizzard has built themselves on that level of refinement with their games. They don't make entirely unique or original titles. They look at a game and go, okay, this is what the game has done. Where can we make it better? And in that level of refinement, that's where they kind of create their own unique take on it.
yeah, and the 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 case with PUBG was really easy to top it because it was just
Yeah.
a bunch of default stuff, basically, a bunch of assets, and it wasn't an asset flip, but like it wasn't exactly the farthest thing away from an asset flip either. It was, I think what 80-90% of the game was assets, but then it had all original programming and everything in it, or something
Mm-hmm.
along those lines. So it was but the programming was just, you know, for a lot of parts, just copying normal first-person shooters, and then the mod
Yeah.
that they had developed.
And don't forget that there was also, what was it? What was the name of that? H1Z1. I think that came out. I think that was before PUBG or like around the same time.
It was before, and
Yeah.
it was because they hired the mod creator for Armor 3 to come in there and do that, and then after he did that for H1Z1, that's when he went and did PUBG.
Yeah.
It's all the same person. First it was a mod for Arma 3, and then it was the H1Z1, and then it was PUBG.
Yeah.
So he went and did after that, and then you know Epic seen that and created Fortnite.
Yeah. No, it's a Fortnite to spend lots and lots of money opening up loot pinatas. But as we've said, like there's so much that goes into making these successful games that a lot of people don't really comprehend. And we said this at the start about marketing that a lot of people don't understand the power that marketing and social media has. And in the piece I wrote, again, Darkest Dungeon with Red Hook Games is one of the best examples of this. Because how many people know who Red Hook Games are and Wayne June and all those stress related puns we've come up with? But a lot of those people only look at Darkest Dungeon as being a critical success. But they don't see the path that Red Hook Games took. And again, like they spent over a year doing marketing and PR alone before they went to Kickstarter. And you'll like hear from some developers who say, I just did my Kickstarter planning like 2 weeks ago. That's all I did. I don't want to do that stuff. And then they're shocked when nobody, goes to do their Kickstarter or support it.
Yeah, I've been told so many times, on almost every game I've ever made, oh, just do a Kickstarter. It's like, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
It's a lot more than just
Why
signing
you?
up. It's not even like it's more than just the 30 days or whatever
Mm-hmm.
that it takes to do that, or the 30 days before it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot of work.
Why don't you just make another FTL? FTL did well. Why don't you just make your own version? Yeah, go starting to do a Kickstarter can be done in a weekend, and then 2 more days, and allow his entire multiplayer network finished too.
Oh yeah.
Now, one thing that I wanted to go back to that you said about like 5-10 minutes ago about art, and you said that art has to be good, and that I think is a point that we need to elaborate on, because when a lot of
What is
people
good?
say good in terms of art, again, what is art? There's another fun. That's another like 2 hour discussion, right? What is art? Let's debate that for the next for the rest of the day. But
What is a roguelike?
are video games art? What is an indie developer? I think I pretty much just summoned Mike. If he's Mike should appear in chat now. I think I just said the magic words there. But when we say art has to be good, some people will conflate that as you must build your game using Unreal Engine 4. It's got to be, we need real time lighting and shadows. We need that, triple A sheen that we see in a lot of 3D games. And we do our weird game segment, you'll probably see that later. But, like, Mojo's point there, if it's not visually pleasing to the eye, like, again, it's very hard, yeah, to talk about what makes something look good. Because, like, for myself, like, and I've said this many times, like, Nintendo to me has some of the most, like, visually pleasing and most, like, artistic looking games out of a AAA company. Like, if you were to tell me, like, if you were to ask me, do I want all games to look like Call of Duty, or I want like Super Mario Odyssey, I will probably go with Odyssey hands down in that regard. Because to me, that is striking, that is unique. But at the end of the day, not everybody can make a game that looks like Mario. And I guess for
Yeah.
you, Char, like when you say, or when someone says good art, what comes to your mind?
Well, number one, art is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the eye of the beholder, but there is like this universal kind of it's it would be appealing to a vast majority, and that's what you want to aim for. And that there are many different ways, but I'm not exactly the best one at this, but
Yeah,
I'm going to try to put what I know out there.
yeah,
Basically, there needs to be style. It needs to be something. I mean, like I would say the art of I don't know, Don't Starve Together is not good art on its own, but it has such a style to it that it becomes good. It's rather unique and appealing because it I don't know. It probably challenges your mind to think about it, kind of thing, and interpret what it is, kind of thing. It's and then you have like like the high graphic ones where they're just this is as close to reality as technology can get it right now. And then there's like stuff like Valkyria Chronicles. Have you ever seen that one?
yeah.
Where they used like it's all 3D, but it all looks
Like
like it's
it's
almost hand drawn out
yeah.
of a comic book.
You can see like the lines like around their faces and like the model kind of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
And
go ahead.
that kind of graphic still holds up today.
Yeah.
Even like the original, like I think like what was that, PS2 or early PS3?
PS3, I think. Let's see. And it was
Those,
even
those
ported to PSP as well.
those graphics still look good today, really good on the PC.
2014 was when that game was released. The first one, that is.
And if somebody told you that game was made yesterday and just released, would you have a problem with it? Would you
Mm,
think that his graphics were good?
yeah. Same thing with Mario. Again, like Mario's graphical style still holds up. Like, well, I would say not including Super Mario 64. Again, that was first generation 3D. But
Mm-hmm.
when you look at Galaxy, Sunshine, and Odyssey, it still looks very much like a cartoon, or it has that pop to it. Or I think Ogoto put it perfectly there, with a distinctive style that differentiates your game from other similar games. And
Yeah.
like again, like it sounds simple when you say that. Like it sounds like we just like we're talking basic stuff here, but it takes a lot for a game to look like that. And like again, like something like when I look at Vision Soft Reset, for example, again, when you look at those images, and I hate to say this because it sounds like I'm insulting the developer with this, but when you look at those images, it just doesn't pop. Like, would you agree with that, Shark?
Yeah, I would say that it's not bad art in
No.
there, but it's not good enough art to stand out in the market. And I would should I would say that that's definitely part of the reason why it failed commercially. Just like I mean, with Chromasia's art, plugging my game here, we had like our testers really thought our art was beautiful, but then when we put it out into the
Mm-hmm.
public, people thought it was an asset flip. People hated it. Some people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like I was talking to somebody in Discord, and they were like, "That's obviously a low quality texture tree." And I was like, "You mean this tree?" And then I post a full image of it, and they're like, "Holy cow, that's beautiful."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh,
But, but like as you said, and as you were like telling on like a previous cast, like how the game looks as a whole, like it looks like it's like the art style is like kind of clashing. Like the models are clashing with the units and with the background, and like
mhm.
it's something that I saw with a lot of games from Arkin. Like, have you watched like when we played like runs of A Valley Without Wind or what was the other one? Oh no, I know we did AI Wars, but there's another one where we played on stream. Oh, no, I can't remember. But have you seen like some of the footage from like Arkin's games in the past?
I don't think so, but I might have.
Uh, yeah, but like with his titles, like with like A Valley Without Wind 1, for instance, that it looks and like again like it's hard to say this without sounding insulting, but like it always looks very low budget in terms of art. Like again, like art is one of those things like gameplay that you're never going to see the amount of work I feel that goes into it unless we go the extreme examples. Somebody like Dragon Ball Fighter Z, for instance, and making that engine look like it's literally like a Dragon Ball episode come to life.
Yeah,
But
they did an amazing job on that.
how many developers are going to be able to do that with their games?
Only one so far.
Mm-hmm. And like getting back to Ogoro's point, like I think like the goal is that the game needs, as he says, the game's art needs to stand out to the point that it becomes almost immediately recognizable, whether it's from the game, the studio, or by both. Like again, like Darkest Dungeon. You show somebody a screenshot or show someone like that image of the guy like holding his head and screaming like he's going insane, that's immediately striking. Like and once you've played Darkest Dungeon, that's from Darkest Dungeon. Like it will never leave you.
Yeah, you could even argue the same thing happens with like when certain artists carry over through games,
Mm-hmm.
like with Play. You
Yep.
look at Oxygen Not Included, and you look at that, and you can see
Don't
the
Starve, or
yeah.
even Invisible Ink as well. Yep.
Hmm.
Like and like here's my tangent. Again, it's not a game wisdom cast having at least one tangent. It's one of the things that's kind of bothered me a lot about like modern animation these days. That everybody just looks like they're either using like the same art style or like the same group of people are just making like all the latest shows, and like a lot of it starts to become homogenized, I think.
Yeah, like I know, like in a lot of these GDC talks, they talk about specific techniques to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think Blizzard had one, and they were talking about how to get the point across for the magic attacks and stuff in their
Mm-hmm.
games and whatnot is like you have to have like a point of high contrast at the tip, where the area is going to be at, and like a trail of darkness behind it kind of thing, or something along those lines, so that you could see the high contrast point to where you know it's going to hit, and the contrast point where it's not. And
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be a point where that becomes oversaturated, and then they'll be teaching you another way to do it
Mm-hmm.
because
Everyone's
it's
already
just,
done. Yeah.
it gets overdone.
I forget where I heard this, but I remember something being very important about, like, in terms of like recognition of a character, being like, if you just have the black and white silhouette, does that character still stand out? Like, if you just see a black and white silhouette of Bugs Bunny or Mickey Mouse or Mario, you'll still know what that character is. But
Hmm.
for a lot of stuff today, like, they all just again have that same look to it that it doesn't really stand out to me.
Yeah, pretty safe to say my chromasia, I they stand out.
Hmm.
Don't see very many rock papers or scissors.
Yeah. But let me do a quick time check. We are just, well, after our long pre-stream, but we're about 50 minutes in for this conversation. So let's see. Are there any, like, let's move on to like another facet of risk mitigation. So we've talked about art. We kind of
Hmm.
loosely talked about PR and marketing. Oh, and we of
We
course
probably need
talked.
to talk about a lot more on that, probably.
Yeah. Well, we did talk about UI design and playtesting. But I guess
Hmm.
for you, Shark, with regards specifically towards gameplay or designing your game, are there any risk factors you think are on that specific topic?
This is a lot harder to
Yeah.
discuss. I mean, there's definitely some that are very clear, but there's other a lot of them that aren't. And like the ones that are clear are like the controls,
Yeah.
the how you design your HUDs and whatnot. The user experience, the UE,
Mm-hmm.
which goes along with the UI.
Yeah.
You kind of almost want to develop the UE and the UI at the same time, but the UE is more than just HUDs and that. I
Yeah.
mean, the UE goes into tutorials,
Onboarding,
shortcuts.
level design, you name it. The
Hmm.
pacing of your game as well.
Yeah.
Now, here's one that I was thinking about, and this I came up last week when we were talking about UX. Is that the same as UE forms?
Yeah, UE and UX is
Yeah.
the same thing.
But
It's user
yeah,
experience, whether you spell it with an E or an X.
always fun we have different spellings like that. But last week there was a Gama Sutra post that went up that kind of was like the inspiration for the chat this week. And I have a question for you, Shark. I'm going to throw this in the chat as well, and to anyone watching this recorded. In that blog post, the author talked about the risks of the genre that you pick for your game, and how some genres seem to be riskier than others. For instance, I think he mentioned that a high risk genre today would be making a 2D platformer. Because again, everybody has made a 2D platformer or has thought about it. But the question I have for you is this: do you think the genre of the game these days is a risk factor or not?
It all depends on how you design your game, honestly. It definitely is a factor in the risk either
Mm-hmm.
way. It's it's not strictly the genre. It's more how many games are new in that genre. How
Mm-hmm.
many, because in the end, you're probably not going to be competing against a game too much against a game that was came out 5 years ago. You're more, competing against, the games that were released in the last 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And so if there's been a ton of PUBG clones and you want to be another PUBG clone, probably it's going to probably be a very big risk there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about necessarily the total games that are released. It's more the more recent games that were released in that area. And the other effect is if you're copying something and that has been made recently, then it's probably a bad idea because that's very risky. But if you're copying something that was made a very long time ago, like Stardew Valley did, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that was not a risk right there. I mean, it was not a risk as of the
The genre.
suggestion of the genre. It was still a risk on the genre based on will there be enough appeal? Will there be enough want for that genre? I mean, that's another factor is the want for the genre. You know, niche genres have a lot less want than popular genres, but popular genres often have a lot more
Yep.
copies. So it's a give and take kind of thing there, and I mean, ideally you'd want a genre that has everybody wanting it and only one or two games in it,
Yep.
and you know how to do a good game design for one of those, and that kind of game fits the theme of your company and everything else, and that would be an ideal situation there, genre wise. But I mean, there, as far as I know, there is no mythical unicorns as of that.
Yeah. And again, this is another thing where we're saying, on one hand, don't pick a genre that is, very competitive and popular, but also don't pick one that nobody's ever heard of. Like, it's just very, again, and that's one of those things, and I think that will be like the final point before we move on, like in a few minutes. But like when you're trying to pick your genre, like as Algardo's saying in chat right now, like a niche genre, like something nobody has ever heard of, is inherently risky. Now, if you do it well enough, like if you do everything else right, you could be that first person. And again, that's kind of like another one of those dreams for a lot of developers. The first developer to make this game work. It's the same thing we kind of saw with Fortnite. Again, as we said in the last part, that Epic took the Battle Royale formula and they made like pretty much like arguably the best possible version of that design at the time. And they became the darling of it. Scott Cawthon with Five Nights at Freddy's. There were horror games before then. Again, I've played a whole lot of them. But his was kind of like the first in that kind of weird management and, again, like the exhausting lore surrounding it. And then everybody played catch up to him. Stardew Valley being another good example. But the problem, though, as you were saying, is that when you have like something that is very niche, you also have to try and figure out just who is the market for that game, and is there a market? Because, like, you may think you have this amazing idea, but if only, let's say, 30 people are interested in playing it, then where are you going to get the funding for it? Now, in some cases, you can take something that's very niche and open it up. And, again, that's another conversation in of itself.
Well, I'll tell you what we're personally doing on that. I mean, like with Project Triad, I meant, grid-based card games is very much a niche, very much a niche. There's, there's what the mini game inside of Final Fantasy VIII. There's, I think that's the only true example of that. I mean, there's some kind of half examples. There's some kind of card game. I forget the name of it off the top of my head. That does use a grid, but it's more of a tactical RPG card game than a grid-based card game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you put out units, and then those units have like a certain amount of HP until they die or something like that. And it's not it's a grid based tactical or it's a card game tactical RPG kind of thing instead of strictly a grid based RPG. I mean, a grid based card game kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And but at the same time is above grid based card games the niche. You have the card game genre as a whole, which is a massive.
Hearthstone, Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh,
Mm-hmm.
you name it. Yeah. And that's another, I think, point that a lot of developers will try and do is they'll try and figure out, okay, there's a popular genre. Is there a niche or is there something unique that nobody has done in that? And I think going back to the platformers, that's kind of what we saw with games like not Res. I'm thinking of Res after we're talking about Invader Zim, but Fez, Braid, the Swapper, like those kinds of games, all have their own unique take on the platformer. But obviously, the platformer genre as a whole is a multi-billion, thanks to Nintendo and Sega during the classical era, and even to today.
Yeah. And so my goal is to apply to the niche, get all the niche. Hopefully, this is the plan. Time will only tell if this succeeds. But if we can succeed in the niche and then get it to where it goes beyond the niche and into card games as a total, and succeed there, I mean that would be amazing. But if we could just get in the niche and everything, we could very well survive and whatnot. But if we could go even farther beyond, to quote Dragon Ball Z, apparently, uh, we can get uh, we could basically print money essentially. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the end, it's not. I mean, so business side, the point is to make money, but that's not why we're making games.
Yeah.
It.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if we could print money, I mean, that would just make it where
If
we
I
could
could
make
print money, that
all
would
the
be
games.
nice too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do that right now. Let's let the government know we'll print our own money, and they won't have a
yeah.
problem with that. Um,
They have no problems with counterfeit.
yeah. I want to go back to what Godo said a few minutes ago about games today blur the genre lines, because that's another very fascinating topic about this. That developers are are experimenting with combining these various gameplay loops. Again, multiplayer meets RPG progression sounded crazy, but it's been the backbone of the Call of Duty franchise success for the last decade. Um, Again, everything from combining XCOM style games. We're seeing stuff like, again, the Mario plus Rabbids game. XCOM, like by Firaxis, is another very fascinating example because there were no new XCOM games that were, nobody was thinking about them until the first person shooter was announced. Everybody, said, this sounds stupid, we want another turn based strategy one. And then Firaxis said, okay, we'll do it. Let's make our own. And again, like sometimes you just never know what genres are going to resonate with people. But all it takes is that for that one big success. Again, the World of Warcraft, the Minecraft, a lot of crafting there. And then when those games become the big hits, and as you said, Charlie, if you're trying to compete with a game that is either less than 3 years old or still being developed, or games as a service live service, then I think you're basically fighting an uphill battle at that point.
Mm-hmm. That's less risk mitigation, more risk taking on.
Yeah. But with that said, I think we can probably move on to another topic. I have one final point I want to bring up, but any other aspects of risk mitigation that you want to discuss now?
Well, the one we barely hit on was exposure and marketing and
Okay.
stuff. And I think we would be definitely doing a disservice if we didn't cover that better.
Okay. Yeah, so with like the marketing PR side, again, like this is a topic that we have discussed many times over, and will probably continue to be discussing for many more casts to come. But it is arguably one of the major areas where a lot of first-time developers will fail on. If it's not UI design, it's probably going to be marketing and PR.
Yeah, exactly. The thing with marketing PR is there's many different aspects of marketing and PR. I mean, there's exposure, which people think marketing is marketing, and there's several different facets of it. I mean, exposure is arguably one of the most important, in my opinion. Of course, I'm no expert on that subject at all, seeing how my marketing completely fell on its face, but I know a lot of the reasons why it fell on its face and whatnot. But exposure is just it's not necessarily promoting your game. It's not saying, hey, come buy my game. It's, here's a game that exists. And then people know that it exists at that point. It becomes in existence, like
it's
your
recognizable.
Discord,
Yeah.
like your Discord became in existence the
One
other
day
day.
it didn't, and then the next day it was, and then the day after that it disappeared again.
Yep. And exposure is it coming into existence. So, you can make a game, but it won't exist unless people know about it. And that's what exposure is. Exposure is getting people to realize that it exists, not promoting it or anything else. Just, here's a game that exists. Do you know about it now?
And again, like as we've said, many people will very much undervalue like that kind of exposure for a game, and they'll only think about it like kind of after the fact. Again, with Darkest Dungeon, there are people who know about Darkest Dungeon who never played it on early access, who never saw the Kickstarter, they never saw any concept art. All they saw was that game on Nintendo Switch or PSN or whatever, and they now know about that game, and they assume from a developer standpoint, that developer's successful now. It was, it's on PSN, therefore it's a multi-million-dollar success. Developers are rolling in millions of dollars. That's always one of the things that you'll see on forums, that people say, oh, they're millionaires now, or stuff like that.
Yeah. The truth is you could sell millions of copies, and depending on your game's budget,
yep,
you could still be losing money at that point.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes back to the marketing, to the exposure side of things, that so much goes into getting that game to be noticed. Again, getting anything to be noticed, as I'm well aware of, that a lot of people will never understand or comprehend it unless they've already done it or they're trying to do it. And when you're trying to get that exposure, again, like another big point about YouTubers and streamers, how many indie developers have said to themselves, my game failed because PewDiePie didn't cover it, or Markiplier, or Dr. Disrespect or Ninja didn't play my game. That's the only reason why I'm not as successful these days.
That would be exposure, but that's not the only reason why.
Yeah.
At least in most of their cases.
But the point is that those massive steps, again, big name coverage like that isn't the marketing. The marketing is getting to the point when your game gets that exposure, that people know about it. And this is why, as you were saying earlier, like with people who just immediately say, just go to Kickstarter. Okay, well, how many people know about me to actually get that kind of success on Kickstarter? If only 30 people know about me, how am I going to get them the money for succeeding?
They'll say that anybody can search you, and they can make the same argument for Steam.
Mm-hmm.
And see how well that works.
Yeah, because everybody will just randomly type, what were we saying last? If you name your title Google or Google News, yes, people are going to type Google News in or whatever. That doesn't mean they're going to find your game.
Mm-hmm.
Or again, don't forget about the titles that have like very weird names. We said it last week. People put numbers and ampersands and exclamation points in their title. yes, it's going to stand out. How many people are going to spell that properly?
Yeah, who's going to be able to search it? Like they could see your game and be like, "Oh, that's awesome! I want to buy that game."
Mm-hmm.
And then they look all over the internet, and nobody can find it because they can't spell your name of your game.
Don't forget, like, there's bonus points there if you have a great game, but you don't have a website. Like, there's literally no way to find you to even get in touch with you to find out more about your title.
Yeah, I did not do that at all. We still got to get our website up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely one place where we messed up.
Yeah. And don't forget, Alberto, not only don't name your game so weird, but also don't name it so generic that nobody will ever like look for it, or it doesn't stick out. Again, like this is like the main theme for this topic, that everything we talk about, it's always don't do the extreme example, but also don't do the safe example as well.
Yeah, it's you've got to do a safe extreme example.
That's the perfect. That's our lesson for today. Be safe, but also be extreme. There you
go. It's like be cold and be hot, but don't be warm.
Yeah. I think we can take this on the road, Char. I think we can start doing like motivational speaking with this exact topic.
Yeah. You want to be hot and you want to be cold, but you do not want to be warm. Do not mix the two flavors together, but you've got to put it all into one name.
Yep. I feel like we're getting to like 1984 double speak here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like with like the marketing side of things, again, like so much of like the success of marketing, it's very hard to understand it because you never know. Again, who is going to find you or find you to be like your pitchman? Again, like with what I do with Game Wisdom, a lot of the people who have become the regulars here, they could have found me from any number of places. It could have been on the YouTube channel. They could have found me on Twitter, on Gama Sutra, Medium, you name it. So you never really know. But you also can't just restrict yourself to just one thing.
Yeah. I mean, I found you because of word of mouth.
Yeah.
I found you because
it's that very
Board Fan.
Yeah.
Board Fan said, "Hey, you should check out these videos," while we were developing Chromasia, and I checked it out, and it seemed like you knew what you were talking about, and it's like, yeah.
And I now know Tomo because you told him about me.
Yep, exactly.
It's, again, like that very crazy, like the whole 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon kind of thing. No guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, and somehow we get there. And,
and I met Tomo because I had seen some kind of cast that said that they were on that said that this is like the lowest price Epic Tavern was ever going to be, and it was on my wish list, so I went ahead and bought it. And then I think I seen a Discord link in the game, or I seen
could have been
somewhere else on the internet, and I was like, okay, I'll join the Discord, see what's going on, kind of thing. And that's where I met Tomo. That's how I met him.
Yeah. And I think like when it comes to marketing like this, and maybe I don't know if this is an agree upon or not, that it seems like if you're going to do marketing in multiple places, you have to kind of give them all like the same fair shake. Like you can't half-ass it in one spot. Like for me, I'm really debating about getting rid of the Facebook side of things because I'm never really on Facebook. I don't use it all that much. And I don't know if I can really do as much with it as I do with Twitter, Medium, and Gama Sutra.
Yeah, same thing here on my Facebook side. Like it's hard enough to maintain everything else, and like Facebook just isn't yielding much. Even though I hear tons of things from developers saying that Facebook ads does amazing, but if you aren't buying the ads, then
Like I've heard people tell me go on Reddit or go on Instagram, and like it's one of those things where like it's worked for them. I'm sure it has, but like can I really dedicate the time to get into that level of success? The same thing with Twitch versus YouTube. Like, I've had the Twitch channel up, but I haven't done anything in it in years, other than like those emergency streams. But like, can I really, do as much on Twitch as I do on YouTube? And most importantly, can you do all this stuff without letting other aspects degrade at the same time?
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, like Reddit, you have to like they have all these rules that you can't self promote, but
Oh God,
you
yes.
have to yet self promote to do your channel, and you have to do all kinds of other stuff, and like it seems almost like a science to post your own stuff on Reddit, and it's like I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what to do. I just never touched it,
Yeah. And
And
like,
I know like other game developers that got banned because they didn't do the science of
oh yeah, I got
Reddit
banned a
right.
few times on Reddit too. Yeah, and like this is like one of the things I'm running with because as you guys know, I'm doing a lot more with contacting libraries throughout the day. So I'm spending 2 to 3 hours a day on the weekdays calling libraries for my presentations. That's 2 to 3 hours I could be making more videos or writing posts on game wisdom or doing more tweets and all kinds of other stuff. Like, again, there's only 24 hours in a day and you're not going to be active for that whole time. Like, the more you put on your plate, the less you can really dedicate to each one of these things.
Yeah,
And I know I've been slacking in some areas. That's the problem. But it's that case of, is this going to help me in the long run? Then I need to, lay that foundation down.
yeah, and like Kit there, said is basically you have to wait on Reddit until you have enough audience, apparently, which would make sense, but like it's like how do we get the initial audience
Yeah,
then?
the whole cart before the horse. It's the same very much thing that I ran into with Patreon. I've had my Patreon for about 5 years now, but the majority of the people who've donated or the ones who are supporting me like heavily, that didn't happen until at least the last 2 or 3 years when I started doing more on YouTube. And again, I know the reason why. Because I'm not established. It's at a point of, here's my Patreon for all my fans who support me. Oh wait, where are all my fans? Who knows me right now?
Yeah, and with our past game Chromasia, we released that, and we did have a Twitter. We had all these different things. We had Discord. We already had established 100+ members, but that didn't get us anywhere. That
Mm-hmm.
was in the sense of being unknown. We we didn't have a fan base. We had a few fans, but
Mm-hmm.
a few fans does not make a fan base.
Yeah.
A base needs to be structurally sound to build stuff on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
A few people that you can stand on their backs isn't a good base. You need like a concrete slab,
Mm-hmm.
several inches thick kind of thing.
We've gone from baseball metaphors to building metaphors now.
Yeah, we have to have all the metaphors.
Yeah.
We got to get a good variety.
Mm-hmm. While still being safely extreme too.
Yeah, we've got to be safe and extreme at
Exactly.
the same time
Oh
without
man,
mixing.
I can't even imagine what my thumbnail art's going to be for this stream after all this.
You got to put the most edgy thing and the most non-edgy thing, and then like be edgy, but don't be edgy, and don't be somewhere in between. And there, we just now existed for Mister Carry On.
Yeah,
I hope I said that right.
and thank you for coming onto the stream there too, and for finding things. And yet again, like I've had some very weird conversations with people about, all of a sudden they find me from out of the blue. And I'm like, I have no idea how they found me to begin with. And again,
Exactly.
it's like one of those things where I can't just say I don't know if Kit is being a if Kit is a if that's a real question or not, or he's being sarcastic after this whole conversation.
We have discussed about the Discord and it existing and then not existing multiple points of this podcast.
Now I just need someone to ask me, have I ever played a Dark Souls game?
Or have I ever made a tactical RPG?
Yeah. But we are almost an hour and a half, and we do exactly. It's going to be the new what's it? What's that term for like? It's like a game that you have to look up stuff around, like non-ARG. I forget. Like Steam did with their whole with one of their summer sales one time. But we need to find the Discord into like a massive hunt there. We need clues. You must answer 5 riddles, and you will get the Discord link. But I want to get to the final point, then we'll move on, or we'll be here for another 3 hours easily. And yes, for anyone new, to be serious, we do have the Discord. It is linked down in the description down below. And yes, we are there, and we talk a whole lot about game design.
And I'm in there as well, and you can get a link to my Discord from in there. Just send me a private message.
Yeah.
I'm just Sharky on there.
Yeah. But the final point I will mention, again, this one could even be its own topic, and that is, at the end of the day, when we talk about risk mitigation in terms of video games or game development, there you go. That at the end of the day, no matter what you do, it is always going to be risky. And I've said this many times before. You can do everything right within your power. You can have an entire fan base lined up. You could have done play testing for years. You have your perfect game. You have all the marketing done, and there's still the chance that it can fail. Like everything that we've said over the last hour or so of this discussion about marketing, play testing, UI, UE design, you name it, that still doesn't guarantee success. And it's one of those very hard points. And again, like why many people will look to popular games and genres to base their game on. Because it cuts down on some of the risk. If you know everybody loved Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon or Darkest Dungeon, you're kind of, stacking the deck. We have some more metaphors here for the stream. But you're already stacking the deck at least a little bit in your favor, as opposed to saying, I'm going to make a competitive CCG open world universe roguelike battle royale game. And I will do that in 2 years.
Yeah. And the problem is when you're going with a like a genre like Darkest Dungeon or whatever, you're stacking your deck in favor of you, but you're also stacking another separate deck against you.
There's
and the
multiple
fact that
decks, people.
Now that they're you're going to be compared to them and you're going to be competing against them, unless it's an old enough game that nobody's played. Or that nobody's played recently, rather.
Yeah. But even with that said, you can't just literally take another game and make it your own. Again, like so many people try to be the next FTL, but FTL is still right here. It's still popular. So why should I play your FTL like when I have, the original still available in my Steam library?
Mm-hmm.
But
it's
yeah,
it's back to that. You're stacking one deck and you're stacking the other deck. One in favor, one in against, and it's that your stream and you're safe at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, and that's kind of the nightmare about game development, that you could even do everything wrong, and there's still a possibility your game will get that breakout success. Again. Yeah. Developers, I know, get ulcers when they think about Goat Simulator. and how that game took off like that.
Or Flappy Bird.
Yeah. And even some people, and that's the other thing, some people will even discount successful games, saying they sold out or they just did something easy and cheap. You know, again, Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm sure there are people who say the same thing about Darkest Dungeon or FTL or whatever, saying, oh, they just made a dungeon crawler and it succeeded. You know, that's all it took to make that game work.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's the problem,
yep.
is that a bad game can succeed as well as a good game. And, you know, the odds are actually fairly close together. A bad one can almost succeed almost as equally as a good one.
Especially
until
if
you do the risk management.
Mm-hmm.
And the risk management is what really sides you in favor, kind of thing. And, you know, sadly, basically all the risk management has basically nothing to do with gameplay. I mean, there's a little bit in there, but not much. I mean, and most of it doesn't even have to do with the game. I mean, the only big thing that's with the game is the biggest one, in my opinion, and that's the art.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, while the art gets people to look at your game, the gameplay is what's going to hopefully keep them around. Because you can get a lot of people looking at your game because of amazing art, but then if all those people hate your game and then they tell their friends about it, then that whole art was, you know, for naught there.
Yeah.
Again, play it safe, but also play it risky.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole mess. There is no right answer. There's no wrong answer either. Well, I mean, there might be some wrong answers. Like, clearly don't do this.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could probably find an example where somebody clearly did that and they succeeded, and it's like, how did that freak accident happen?
Yeah. I think that's the quote for today. It's a mess. You know, that's the quote for this topic. It's a mess, people. It's safe.
Freak accidents.
Yeah. And just be extremely safe or safely extreme, and you'll do well.
Yeah. Be extremely safe or safely extreme.
Yep. There you go. We solved the whole situation there, Sharp. We did it.
We've solved game development.
Yep.
It's like the Matrix is decoding right now. It shows a picture of the video game, and that is the video game.
We're through the looking glass now.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a book on design, my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, is out now. It is available where most books are sold, and it comes in paper, hardcover, or digital copies. This is the perfect book for anyone interested in learning about game design, whether you are a student, enthusiast, or just a fan. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.